Sometimes nonfiction can read like a slog, but if you're looking for a true story that reads like fiction, Alfred Lansing's Endurance might just be for you. Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, your one-stop, spoiler-free shop for all things audiobook. Now, I really enjoy reading nonfiction, but as a teacher, I find that during the school year, if a book's pacing is slow to me, I have a really hard time getting through it, and because of this channel, I have a pace I have to keep up. Now, sometimes nonfiction isn't slow, and I was recommended a nonfiction book by a friend that I thought was great, so then I decided to take their next recommendation, which turned out to be Endurance by Alfred Lansing. Now, if you're looking for a nonfiction book that really truly feels like an adventure novel, this is the one for you. It's based on Ernest Shackleton's 1914 to 1916 Imperial Transatlantic Expedition. That's a mouthful. The mission, which was intended to make a land crossing of Antarctica the first ever, failed. But what really this story becomes about is Shackleton's incredible leadership and his ability to get all 27 crew members home alive through treacherous conditions. Not long into the expedition, their ship was destroyed when it was trapped by ice, and the book takes you through a blow-by-blow of the decisions that Shackleton makes. It uses many diary entries, and there are incredible records of what the men went through. It's really incredible, and this book made me reflect on this, to think about how we have modern technology, and at this point, that technology was not available, like communication technology and all of the electronic things we have now that are part of our everyday life. To think about a time when people were starting to do things because then they would be the first to do them, and they did them under these incredibly treacherous conditions, is really mind-blowing, and I found this story both inspiring and informative. It's amazing to think how lucky we are that people pioneered things before us, and we can just step forward and take advantage. Although I'm not exactly sure how a trans-Antarctic crossing benefits me or how I'm taking advantage of what Shackleton did. So the Endurance set sail in 1914 to the South Atlantic with the intention of crossing Antarctica. But around October 1915, the ship became completely encased in ice. They were pretty far from their intended land route, where there were resources set up. But when the men had to abandon the ship, they spent months floating on ice, hunting seals and penguins, and burning blubber for fuel. They had minimal clothing and supplies, but they were somehow able to drag their lifeboats across the ice towards Elephant Island, which was even further from their goal. Shackleton eventually made the basically crazy decision to take 3 small lifeboats across the Atlantic Ocean. Somehow, against all odds, he made it safely to land and was able to return with help for the rest of the crew. One crew member did die of a fatal heart attack, but the rest suffered no more than frostbite injuries. And actually, when they were picked up, it was commented how their morale was quite high. The book goes into great detail about Shackleton's leadership abilities and how his particularly skillful management of personalities kept the crew in good spirits and kept the crew alive. I found the use of diary entries and straightforward language really impactful in its ability to convey the emotion of the daily grind and what these men went through psychologically. The weight of this ordeal on these men was intense, and honestly, I don't know if this is something that I could survive having read all of this, but there were a lot of really emotional moments in the book, particularly when Shackleton had to make the decision to abandon his crew in order to save his crew. I mean, the accounts from both sides of that exchange were really, really impressively told, and I felt like I was right there with those men, even though, thank God, I was not. I found the book to be inspiring and thrilling and a rare account of a collective survival of a group. I think the book is unusual in that it feels like an adventure story, and I had to fairly consistently remind myself that this was something that actually happened. Real people went through this and real people survived this. And even though the mission failed, the fact that Shackleton got all of his men back safely is really mind-blowing. It doesn't even seem like it's realistic that they survived such treacherous conditions, yet with minimal supplies, somehow they did for multiple years. It's amazing that Shackleton's greatest achievement was not reaching his goal, but rather changing the mission to make it about survival. This man put aside his goals of Antarctic crossings in order to make sure that all of his men got back alive when the mission failed. I think it's a great achievement and an example of true leadership to be able to pivot and change your goal and prioritize human life when really he was an explorer. But I think this is also why Shackleton is so famous. He literally pulled off the impossible even though he didn't succeed in the mission. The book was narrated by Simon Prebble, who did an excellent job. I think he really conveyed the emotion, and I think he brought this story to life. Some of the parts of the book that possibly could have been a little drier were really energetic as a result of his narrating. So again, when you think about a nonfiction story feeling like you're listening to a fiction story, man, this was well done, and Simon Prebble was the perfect voice for this. I really felt like I was listening to an explorer from 1914, and it made the book come alive for me. Now, you could easily look up Shackleton's expedition and you could do a little research and you could learn a little bit about this, but honestly, while I won't ever discourage doing research, you should pick up this story because not only will you learn everything about this expedition, but it'll have you on the edge of your seat, and that's a lot more interesting than historical sites or Wikipedia. It's rare that I rate a nonfiction book 5 stars. In fact, I think coincidentally, the last book that I awarded 5 stars to in the nonfiction category was The Wager by David Gran. Now, if you enjoyed that story, I think you will definitely enjoy this one as well. They have a lot in common as far as that they're maritime adventures, but this is really different and really incredibly put together. I think if all nonfiction were this exciting, I'd probably never read fiction, but I'm really glad this one was recommended to me and that I chose to go forward with it. While I do read nonfiction fairly regularly, I'm always looking for recommendations. So if you have a nonfiction book you've read that you think is really worth my time, please let me know in the comments. I would very much appreciate your thoughts. If only I could have the time to just read every book ever, but let me know what you think. And remember, you might love what I hate and hate what I love, so make your own opinion. But thanks for listening to mine. See you next time.